Hey everybody, what's up? Um, yeah, you can see down here I'm going to be reading off several, I guess you could say, rants by a couple of fans. And quite honestly, I don't think anybody could probably blame them maybe for what they're about to say. Now, yes, I will admit both rants are courtesy of a certain website of fan artistic freedom. I'm not lying here, folks. I am not lying. If I'm lying, I'm trying, but I'm not lying. I think you guys know exactly what website I'm talking about. So, anyway, what do they have to say? Well, one basically entitles their thing some general ranting. Now, you might say, well, what does that mean, Brian? Well, let's see what they have to say. This person posted this about 17 and a half minutes ago. 17 and a half, 17 and a half hours ago. Around that time frame. Basically 17 and a half hours ago. Now, again, you're probably wondering, well, what do they have to say? What are they ranting about this time? Well, let's take a look at what they're ranting about, shall we? Let's take a look at that, shall we? What this person says, this first individual says is, and I quote, Now as anyone that cares is likely aware by now, Penders might win the lawsuit. I'm in two minds about this. On one hand, it means the loss of many characters that were actually pretty cool. On the other hand, it'll probably cripple the comic and force a reboot, which I have been clamoring for since, well, a long-ass time now. As it stands, I've got no clue about the legal stuff, especially since I'm not even American and do not live there. So I have no interest in its legal system. But what I can say is that Archie's lawyers have screwed this up majorly. I'm also not sure how deeply this will reach. For example, some characters like Shard, number 3 best villain Miles, or my personal favorite punching bag Scourge, have been heavily altered from the Penders era designs, with even the names differing. And it's only the origin stories that can easily be reconned, that are under threat. Plus, they are effectively mere counterparts to pre-existing Sega, SatAM, or Archie characters. The name and image of A-A-S poster child Fiona Fox. Why can't almost everything we complain about be linked to her? Was first created and used by Mike Gallagher in issue 28. For the robot, an Auto Fiona has never been given that name in canon, being referred to as something to the effect that quote unquote that robot Fiona every time she is brought up. While Penders did introduce the organic version, she was basically the same design, but taller and with visible ears, and didn't end up with a different look and an actual personality until Bolus came along. Penders did nothing except add another character with the exact same look and name, effectively making her another example of the above. That aside, I want to clarify something about this whole niche character thing. So what if the characters that originated in SatAM aren't what sells copies of the book? So what if they are? As Flynn put it, niche characters. Does that mean they should be changed? Of course not. Yes, they aren't as well known as the Sega cast, but they still have a large and very vocal fandom, which makes up a fair portion of the comics readers. Even this group used to be made almost entirely of Sega fans who hated everything in the comic, and has now evolved into a group of critics and the occasional troll who are more against the wanton brutalizing of a character in a failed attempt to make things more dramatic. So while Sally, Bunny, Antoine, and Rhoda, and to a lesser extent Nicole, do not draw on Sega fans, revamping them won't help. It won't make rabid Sega fans like them, since they'll have other things about the comic that they hate. And the designs of a character is not going to be high up the list of things that piss them off. However, it will piss off a large majority of those that do like the characters. TLDR, the Sega-style redesigns won't win over Sega fanboys, but they will piss off a large group of fans of those characters. Okay, well basically they were just ranting on something that they felt need to be ranted on, just basically giving their thoughts on the whole Pender situation and what will happen. And basically, again, just doing some general ranting of certain topics, which you can agree with or not when you click on the description. I'll be right back, folks. Gotta go take care of something. Sorry, folks, I had to go check something. I'm very sorry about that. I had to go check something. But yeah, this individual basically feels, like just ranting right there about what's going on with Penders and the whole redesign thing and stuff like that. Now, this individual that comes up next is somebody new, apparently. Yeah, I think they're new. Let me check. Because I don't think I've ever seen their name before. Yes, this person is, I think, pretty much new. I think I've read maybe one of their rants, and that was it. But their rant, or their entry at this site, was posted about 17 hours and 51 minutes ago, almost 18 hours ago. And this is what they had to say. And I quote, "Okay, so a lot of people are angry / disapproving about Ian's inconsistency. Some of it involves problems with his current and past Sonic writings, which as we all know is a flaw that he can't really fix unless he becomes better with writing. However, there are also problems with his inconsistency when it evolves around what's canon and what isn't. For example, we've got Locke's death, Locke being Knuckles' father, which, based on Ken Pender's Mobius 25 Years Later story, is supposed to die of some pancreatics problem, or something like that. I can't remember really exactly what it is. When Flynn came along, he had Locke die by sacrificing himself to allow Knuckles to turn back into his normal self. In Pender's run, Locke's death in Mobius 25 Years Later was supposed to be canon. Also, there's the Krazood plant. This was a plant created by a SWATbot, the lowest thing on the Robotnik hierarchy, when it was only able to take the shape of a plant and would rip anything around it apart. Flynn comes Flynn comes over and turns it into a monster that can manipulate any kind of machinery, which I'm sure was never what it was intended for. Now, before anyone comes over and says that I'm just ranting my ass off and complaining about things that have already happened, please hold that thought until you've finished, because these examples above are just examples of what I'm talking about. What I'm really trying to show is Ian seems to do his own things for the comic, and the reason for this, I believe, is because Ian wants to make the comic his own thing, with his own concepts about the universe. He doesn't want to work with things that are already made. He doesn't want to work with things that were already made by people before him. So he does what he can to change things to make it his own, and does it to the best of his power. That doesn't mean he does a good job, so he can have smaller margins for what he can't write. This is a problem, since most fans like us don't want to see the things that we grew up with changed, or just want consistency that makes sense. Now comes the solution for this. Ian wants to make the comic based off his own thing, right? So why not just finish the comic as soon as possible with a final or finale and make a reboot? If this happens, we won't be dealing with inconsistency in stories, or not as much anyways, and won't be left hanging based on the old comic mythology and rules. Ian would be free to start over and wouldn't be getting as much problems from the fans about him changing what is and isn't canon. Take the Krazood plant I listed earlier. Many fans think that's stupid, since it shows no evidence whatsoever about having any powers, or having any of the powers Ian says it has. If he was working with a reboot and decided to do the same thing with the Krazood plant, I believe fans would be saying it's more creative than stupid. And this is before Ian used it in 241. It is a good twist. It is a good twist. There'd be no plot holes about it, because it's a new Sonic universe, so Ian can make his own rules. Same could go for Locke's death in issue 182. I know a reboot won't fix everything, but I bet it would give us a story that isn't a product of Ian trying to mold clay that is already hardened. Also, I've heard that Ian does good with his other comics like Mega Man, so a reboot may make the comics better. That's my view on things. Anybody reading this, please leave a comment below about what you think about this. If you disagree, I'll be happy to discuss this with you. Just don't flame me. And again, just as I've mentioned before, I will provide links to both those in the description boxes and in the playlist box. But let me kind of say this right now. I'm glad this person talked about this whole reboot deal, because I talked about this previously, and I said it before. Whatever's going to happen with the whole Pender situation, Archie Comics is not about to go out and reboot this comic book. Now, I'm not saying they... Now, okay, first of all, I'm not saying they will, and I'm not saying they won't. But I don't think they're going to want to go through this whole situation they're going through just to say, hey, we're going to reboot. Basically, what they're doing with these Genesis waves that take place in the story arcs is basically they're rebooting the world of Sonic, but within the current continuity, which again implies to what I was talking about with the redesigns. I think the redesigns are going to come courtesy of the second Genesis wave, when everything's restored. I know people might find that kind of stupid, but you know what? What else can you say? How else can you say the redesigns are going to come about? You know, how else are you going to explain Sally's new look or Bunny's new look? How are you going to explain that? You need a reason, and this small reboot of a reboot, again, within the continuity is going to do just that. But I understand, though. I understand where people like this individual here, and many over at the Sonic Stadium, Sega Forums, and Bumble King, you know, and even at DeviantArt, I understand where they're coming from when they say a reboot